Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Boardman Black and Gold podcast with Zane. Unfortunately, David is not with me this week. He had a very busy week this week, so I'm flying solo today, and we'll do just a little quick episode for this week. I will say that we didn't have a whole lot to talk about this week, although there is some news on the Steelers front that David and I will definitely be diving into when we can both get back on together. But just as a couple of things that we have not yet mentioned on the podcast, just a couple of new signings, honestly, that are fairly relevant, I would say. Steelers did sign Jaquan Brisker, who was the safety for the Chicago Bears this last season. He was among the league leaders in interceptions. The Bears, obviously a very great interception team last year. They turned the ball over, or they turned other teams over, rather, a good bit, and Jaquan Brisker was a big part of that. He's also a big Pittsburgh guy, which I'm a big fan of, and I know David can probably attest to that as well. And like I said, we'll dive into these a little bit more granularly, if that's even a word. Granularly? Granularly. I'm sure that's a word. Usually if you put ly at the end of a word, you can make it an adverb. So I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to keep with it. So on a more granular level, we will dive into these once we start to talk about the Steelers again. And then another couple of interesting signings. Ryan McCollum, a center we're bringing back. And actually, I don't know if we're bringing him back. Let me check this out real quick. I believe he was actually with the Colts. Let me double check. No, he was with the Steelers. Yeah, so he was definitely some depth rather that we could bring back on the offensive line, which I like that too. Just to give a little bit of a security blanket for Zach Frazier, especially at the center position, which is good. The other interesting signing that we made recently was running back Travis Homer, who was with the Seattle Seahawks this last year, which if you think about the Seahawks running back room, it was K9 and Zach Charbonnet, and a lot of, I think, fantasy managers, including our own David DeSantis, was quite upset with how much they utilized Zach Charbonnet. Travis Homer was kind of the third guy in that equation, and he got in there a couple of times and made some nice plays, which that's an interesting little depth signing that we've got going on here, which is nice. I do like that a lot. So that's kind of the third running back, if you figure, after we've got Jaylen Warren and Rico Dowdle. It seems as though the Steelers are leaning more towards Rico Dowdle kind of being the 1A, and then Jaylen Warren going back to that 1B that he was earlier in his career. And then it kind of creates a conversation about what Caleb Johnson's going to be, because he showed that in his rookie year that, obviously the big gaffe that he had against the Seahawks, and then also just not really wowing anybody with any other times that he got into the game. So Travis Homer is an interesting signing. Obviously, it's very depth heavy, but he has some home run power, which is kind of funny given his last name. But it's almost like, what are we going to do with Caleb Johnson now? Because now we've got three running backs, and I would figure to say that Travis Homer is probably slotted above Caleb Johnson in the depth chart. So that's an interesting little thing. So we'll kind of have to see how that plays out. But it also kind of creates a conversation about what this draft is going to look like. And I'll say this now, I'm not going to dive into this because it would be a blatant injustice for me to talk about the draft when David is not here with me. And frankly, he's the expert on these types of things anyway. So I won't dive too much into the draft, but it does kind of raise some questions about how the Steelers are going to approach this draft. So there's definitely options in places. I mean, I think offensive line is always kind of something that the Steelers prioritize in the drafts, especially since the 2020s have began. I will say that, corners is an interesting prospect because obviously you got Asante Samuel back and you got Jamel Dean back along with Joey Porter Jr. So cornerback depth, maybe a little bit, but maybe it's not necessarily something that we need to prioritize early on. And even wide receiver with Michael Pittman kind of coming over in that trade. I would personally like maybe one more wide receiver. I don't know if that's a first rounder or a second rounder or not, but at least it's something to kind of keep in mind. Right now, I don't know exactly what direction the Steelers are going to go. And it's a little bit scary to me to think that we still have not signed a quarterback yet. I think there's been talks about Aaron Rodgers and how close he is. And even today, as I'm recording this, Mike McCarthy had came out with a statement saying that it would be good for Will Howard to learn under Aaron Rodgers once again, specifically along the lines of footwork goes. And that was something that he was quoted as today. So it seems as though Mike McCarthy is pretty bent on bringing back Aaron Rodgers, which is not news necessarily, but I have also seen some things where Aaron Rodgers is trying to demand a lot more money than he was previously, which is just ridiculous given the fact that he was about league average last year. He was not spectacular. He was not terrible. He was kind of just in between. And the fact that he is demanding some more money, at least so it seems right now, that's the reason why he has not signed yet, which for the fact that it is almost draft time and we still don't have a quarterback signed, David and I talked about this just a couple of weeks ago that now we're getting to the point where we're upset and we're getting scared, frankly, because Ty Simpson's right there. And there are plenty of people that think Ty Simpson is a good option for the Steelers. And actually, I've seen some stuff, too, that Carson Beck has been linked to the Steelers in ways, too, which is, again, absolutely not. Get me the heck away from that. Get me the heck away from every quarterback in this draft, frankly. I mean, even if it is Fernando Mendoza, which I've even heard some rumors that the Raiders might pass on him. I don't know how legitimate those are, but it is something to keep in mind. And I don't think that this draft is going to go the way anybody thinks. I think this is going to be a very wonky draft, and it makes a lot of sense that the Steelers are going to be in Pittsburgh for this draft, kind of have an amalgamous need, not really a defined need, but again, quarterback seems like a problem right now, and I don't know where Aaron Rodgers stands. I mean, he might just sign in the next week or so, and we can put this all to rest, but again, this is definitely an interesting conversation because the Steelers are in a pretty decent position to be able to take best available, which is, again, something that David and I talk about. It's not something they've necessarily been able to do in the recent years, but it's something they have done, maybe to a fault. And, you know, we can look back in hindsight and say yes or no or whatever, but at this point, it's an interesting question, and we'll actually be talking about the draft in 2 weeks. So not this week, not next week, but in 2 weeks, we will be covering what we think is going to go on in the NFL draft, especially for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that'll be myself and David. We've got that one all planned out. So we will have that one for you guys in just a couple of weeks. But another thing that I kind of wanted to do and piggyback off of last week's episode actually was to talk a little bit about the Pirates in their opening weekend, as well as the Penguins as their feverish playoff push continues, especially since this is just me this week, and it's going to be just a shorter episode. I won't elaborate too long on these subjects, but just to kind of give you an idea, the Pirates, their opening weekend was very interesting, and I'll say this as a diehard Pirates fan that watches most every game and has watched most every game that they've played since probably 2012. I wasn't exactly upset with opening day, despite how terrible that first inning went, with Paul Skeens only getting 2 outs, with O'Neal Cruz having 2 botched balls in center field that led to 5 runs being scored for the Mets. And I'll say this, Skeens did not look great. He did not look sharp. He didn't have the put-away pitch. He didn't give up a lot of hard contact in that inning, though, which was an interesting little prospect. And I'll say this, too, that O'Neal Cruz should have had 2 outs in center field. And the reason that Skeens gave up 5 runs and got knocked out of the game in the first inning was because Cruz could not track a fly ball in center field. He came in instead of going back, and then he could not track a fly ball into the sun. Now, I'll say this too. Jake Mangum, who played in Game 2 on Saturday, showed that he is very capable in center field. He made an actual incredible catch in center field where he pretty much went Spider-Man across the center field wall and made a couple of really nice plays with his bat, too. He was 2 for 4 in that game. He took a walk, I believe, as well. He was a guy that was very noticeable in just the way that he played. And I'll tell you this, I was big on Jake Mangum last year. I thought that he was kind of this interesting older prospect that had just kind of found his way into the MLB ranks. He did a really nice job with Tampa Bay in his role. He was a very specific niche type of guy with the Rays. He was a 9-hole hitter. He didn't hit for any power. He would slash the ball. He would play excellent defense, and he would play hard. You could see night and day the difference between Jake Mangum in center field and O'Neal Cruz in center field. And I'll say this too. I don't know what the remedy is to this, because I frankly don't know what you're supposed to do when you've got bogged down with a DH that is Marcell Ozuna, who has 1 hit so far in the first 4 games of the season. You've got O'Neal Cruz, who is a defensive liability in center field despite his overwhelming athleticism and capabilities. And then you've got guys like, just around the team as well, Henry Davis, who has been excellent defensively behind the dish, but can't hit worth anything. You've got guys like Nick Gonzalez, who, yes, has come up with a couple of clutch hits here and there, but can't really get anything consistently going. And then like Jared Triolo, who can't do anything, not only defensively, but also offensively. And for the reason that he's in the lineup, he's supposed to be a guy that's playing good defense. Frankly, he's not. He's not playing good defense. He's got 0 range at shortstop. He's a third baseman by craft, and again, his glove plays like a shortstop, but his range is not indicative of a shortstop. So I'll say this, is there's like probably 3 or 4 guys that could be DHs on this team. I think of probably Ryan O'Hearn in that conversation as well. There are guys that just should not be playing the field on this Pirates squad, and the fact of the matter is that they only have 1 DH spot, and that DH spot is reserved for a guy that is literally almost 40 years old and can't run, nor could he play the field if you put him in the field in the last 5 or 6 years. So the Pirates have an issue, especially defensively, and the pitching has been interesting. The pitching has been okay, actually. Outside of Paul Skeen's very uncharacteristic first inning, which I'm not holding against him, largely because of the defense, I thought the pitching has been good. Carmen Mlodzinski had 1 bad inning. We talked about this, me and David, last week, is that he can't get through the second time through the order. It ended up being the third time through the order that he couldn't get through, but I digress and say that Carmen Mlodzinski is just not a starter. I thought that Braxton Ashcraft had a great outing yesterday against the Reds in a game where the Pirates literally had as many runners on base as the Penguins scored goals last night. That just shouldn't happen in any case ever. They had 8 base runners. The Penguins scored 8 goals. The Pirates, they had, I think, 4 hits in the game, maybe 4 hits, if I remember correctly, and they were all singles. The only guy that got to second base was Nick Gonzalez when he stole second after a walk, and then a couple of walks to start the 9th inning, followed up by the absolute worst Jared Triolo at-bat I've ever seen in my life, where he swung at 2 pitches out of the zone on sliders when the guy had literally thrown 1 strike prior to that at-bat, and then he strikes out looking on the 3rd pitch of the at-bat. Absolutely abysmal at-bat, especially when the first 2 guys had walked 1 and 2 with literally 1 strike being thrown between the 2 of those at-bats. And then you got guys like Spencer Horwitz and Nick Gonzalez who can't put any hard contact on a baseball. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, guys, but the only guys that are really producing in the Pirates lineup are the imports. And not even all the imports at that. Brandon Lau's been amazing. Ryan O'Hearn's been amazing. And that's it. Marcell Ozuna, like I said, has 1 hit. And nothing looks like he's getting out of this anytime soon. And again, I said it, he had his worst season of his career last year. And it is not looking like it's going to be getting any better anytime soon. So the Pirates are going to have to pitch their way to wins, unfortunately, which is something I believe they're capable of. We're going to get through the entirety of the rotation tonight with Bubba Chandler in just a couple of minutes. I'll be watching that game once I finish up here, but I like the Pirates' rotation. I actually kind of like their bullpen too, as a matter of fact. They did not have a great outing on the opening day against the Mets. Isaac Mattson did not look great. He looked better in his last couple of outings, but the bullpen is decent, and I will say that. The issue, again, and this is just Groundhog Day all over again, is that the Pirates just can't hit. And as much as I just want to believe that somewhere deep inside some of these people, they have a hitter within them, I just don't believe it. I don't think it's possible. And I'll say it, Connor Griffin can't get up soon enough, because with the middle infield defense and offense that we're getting out of Jared Triolo, it is just simply not sustainable to continue to put him at shortstop and give him meaningful at-bats in the 5 or 6 hole every day. It just can't happen. And frankly, I think, too, that they're probably going to need another bat somewhere else. And I'll make the recommendation that they get the password up here. I can't pronounce his first name. I think it's Jonoxon Garcia. Jonoxon Garcia, something along those lines. They call him the password because his first name literally looks like a password, which is funny. So I like him. I like the idea of getting him up as soon as possible because they're just going to have to figure something out. I would love to give Ryan O'Hearn at bats at first base. I am not attached to Spencer Horwitz at all. I don't necessarily see him being a long-term option, despite I think the Pirates thinking him of such. So I would love to give Connor Griffin a shot at shortstop. I'd love to give an opportunity in the outfield to the password Garcia whenever he comes up. And then you got to find out something to do with O'Neal Cruz, and I don't know a good option for this. The Pirates have almost handcuffed themselves to where they have no positional flexibility, and the positional flexibility that they have is not relevant to what they actually need offensively. And frankly, too, O'Neal Cruz has not been good offensively either. Neither has Brian Reynolds. Neither has Henry Davis. I mean, I can walk down the line. Nobody is good offensively outside of Ryan O'Hearn and Brandon Lau. So there's issues here. And again, I get it. It's the first weekend of the season, but I'll tell you this right now. If the Pirates put up another stinker tonight against this Ben Williamson guy or whatever his name is from the Reds, literally their fifth starter, probably had like a 5 ERA last year. If they can't find a way to do something offensively tonight, then I'm going to be very close to throwing in the towel if I haven't already thrown it in already. So just let that be known as my opinion on what's going on with the Pirates right now. They're a very hard watch, and I'm not going to pretend like they're an easy watch or they're a fun team to watch. The thing that's probably making me most upset is the fact that they're the exact same team entertainment-wise as last year. I watch games out of obligation. I don't watch them for fun. I watch them because I'm a Pirates fan, and I love the Pirates. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm entertained by them. And in fact, the only thing I'm entertained by really is their pitching. And I can't remember the last time I've been entertained by a good hitting Pirates team. I literally probably have to go back to 2015 to like even think about a team that was even decently good offensively. So don't think that I'm like abandoning them by any means, because you will never question my loyalty when it comes to the Pittsburgh Pirates, but just let it be known that I'm very weary of the start to this season. And I know it's a long season, 162 games. A lot of things can happen, but I'll say it right now. I'm getting real sick of what I'm seeing right now. So they've got a short leash with me, and I'm not willing to extend that leash any farther, especially with the things that they did this offseason. So understand that from me. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of touch on, how about them Penguins, man? This is a special team. They're a fun team to watch. Actually, a very, if you're talking about the Pirates and you're talking about how abysmal they are to watch, and it's like watching paint dry, the Penguins are the exact opposite of that. And you don't have to look any farther than last night's game, which will be 2 nights ago when you're listening to this. The 8-3 win against the New York Islanders in what was absolutely the most crucial game of the season to this point, which is funny because tonight they're playing the Detroit Red Wings, and it is equally as important as last night. We'll get to that when we get there, but whatever. Last night's game could have gone very poorly, and it was almost going very poorly very early on because they found themselves in a 3-1 deficit, and the Islanders had a power play midway through the second period, and it took a shorthanded goal from Rickard Rakell to jumpstart the Penguins, and they never looked back from there. Anthony Mantha, couple of goals. Avery Hayes got involved. Brian Russ got involved. Like, everybody just started scoring. And that was against a very good goalie in Ilya Sorokin. I'll say this. If the Penguins can win tonight, I'm confident that they can get into the playoffs, because I think that the odds are, it's like if they win tonight against the Red Wings, then it's like a 93% chance they'll make the playoffs. Last night, if they were to have lost against the Islanders, their odds would have gone from 90% to, I think, 50-ish% to make the playoffs. And I'm looking at it right now. The teams that are in the race are going to be playing each other a lot, which is an interesting thing in the NHL, because usually you think it's like, okay, if they're playing each other, one team has to lose. But that's not exactly the case, because if they start going to overtime against each other, then both of these teams are picking up points. And that creates an issue, because the points right now, the Penguins are second in the Metro with 90. They have one game in hand on the New York Islanders, and they lead them by 1 point. That's exactly why last night's game was so crucial, not only for the fact that the Penguins won, but that they also blew them out and won in regulation. That adds another regulation win to their total, which is huge, because that's one of the tiebreakers. And the Penguins, have that tiebreaker over every other team that is associated with this wild card race in the Eastern Conference. So again, the Penguins have 90 points. The New York Islanders have 89 points. And then the top wild card team is the Boston Bruins. They've got 92 points. They're pretty locked into their spot. They would have to have a pretty hard collapse. So you can kind of block out the top wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. But then you look down. You've got the Blue Jackets at 88 points. They have been red hot, although they have lost the last 3 games, and they did blow a really bad one to the Boston Bruins on Sunday. So that's something to keep in mind. On their tail out of the playoffs are the Ottawa Senators, the Detroit Red Wings, whom we're playing tonight, and then the Philadelphia Flyers. All of them have a game in hand on the Penguins, and they're all at 86 points. So tonight, if the Red Wings were to beat the Penguins, they would have a game in hand, and they would only be 2 games behind. I don't know what the Senators and Flyers are doing tonight specifically. I know the Blue Jackets are playing the Hurricanes, which is a really interesting matchup, because if the Penguins can win tonight, then they would kind of make up some ground on the Hurricanes. And I'll say it just to make sure it's clear. They're not going to usurp the Hurricanes in the Metro Division, but it's definitely something to just kind of keep in mind. Interestingly enough, I probably would rather be a Hurricanes fan tonight than a Blue Jackets fan, simply for the fact that the Blue Jackets are specifically in the Metro. And if I'm the Penguins, I don't want to mess with the wild card this year. The fact that we're in second place in the Metro right now is very encouraging. And the only 2 teams that can really hurt us in that regard are the Blue Jackets and the Flyers. The Blue Jackets are in an interesting spot. The Flyers have really come onto the scene. They are 8-1-1 in their last 10 games. And shout out Aaron Capito, our resident Philadelphia Flyers / Eagles fan. We've had him on the podcast before. He's starting to get a little bit into this playoff hockey type of thing. We've only had him on board for, I think, this year or maybe a little bit of last year, but he's really enjoying the Flyers. And I'll tell you, he's getting in the right time, because the Flyers are really making some noise, and they can kind of turn some heads right now. It's same thing with the Senators, I would say as well. Now, the Red Wings, they are on their heels. If they lose tonight, their playoff hopes might just be done for. And that is something that I'm hoping the Penguins can take advantage of and put away tonight. So we're hoping for a big win tonight. And I'll say this too. It's like I'm looking at the rest of the schedule for the Penguins. I talked about it last week that they've got those back-to-backs, one with the Panthers and then the other one with the Capitals later in the season. If they win tonight, like I said, they're probably about a 95% chance to make the playoffs. But again, looking at the rest of their schedule, they got Tampa Bay, Florida, New Jersey, which is never an easy game, Washington, and then St. Louis. Big game tonight against Detroit. Again, this one has a lot of implications. Last night's against New York probably had even more implications. And then even looking back to when they played Ottawa on Thursday nights, that shootout win was crucial, because you got an extra point against Ottawa. You got the extra points for yourselves. That really puts them in the spot that they are now, because if they lose that game, which they have lost plenty of shootouts this season, I mean, we've talked about it up and down. If they would have lost that game in regulation or in shootout fashion, then this looks very different. I mean, I'm telling you, literally every single point is precious to the Penguins at this point forward. So I'm really hoping that the Penguins can just take advantage of the Red Wings tonight. The fact that it's a team that's kind of on their heels, although the desperation might make it a little bit of a tougher challenge, but you could probably argue the same thing with the Islanders last night, and the Penguins being with back against the wall and doing 8 goals in the last 30 minutes of the game. That tells me everything I need to know about the fight. And actually looking into the locker room with a couple of videos from last night's game, there was no celebration. They were just like, okay, let's go. We're going to get back to it, and we're just going to hand it back to the Red Wings tonight, which I'm hoping that they do just that, and we don't have to worry about any of this come a week's time when we're talking about the Eastern Conference playoff race, because like I said, it is unbelievably close. So that's kind of the thoughts that I have as of right now. Actually, I'm thinking of this now. Sidney Crosby did come back last night, and Evgeny Malkin, I believe, is coming back tonight, which is huge to get those guys back and healthy into the lineup. Biggest thing moving forward is not only to win, but to keep those guys healthy, because Gino had that suspension. That wasn't necessarily a health issue, but with the health issue that he did have that kept him out of the lineup for the last couple of nights, got to have him healthy, got to have Sid healthy. Those are the catalysts for a deep playoff run if you want to have one. So hoping that those guys can stay healthy. hopefully we can also get Blake Lizotte back in the lineup as well. I think when we lost him to an injury for a couple of weeks, I think that really kind of set us back because he's really the centerpiece of that fourth line, which is the priority of our depth scoring, which has been unbelievable this season. I mean, the amount of guys that we have scoring up and down the lineup is just crazy. And if the Penguins want to be a good team in the playoffs, they have to have depth. That's the biggest reason why very good teams can't win when it matters most, is because they don't have the depth. The Penguins have a lot of star power, but they also have a lot of good guys in the wings that can help them to make a deep playoff run. So really hoping they can take advantage tonight against the Red Wings and just kind of put all this to rest. Not to say that it is done for if they do win tonight, but it is much more of a comfortable situation, if that's even possible, in this Eastern Conference playoff race. So I'm very excited, I'll say. I'm thrilled to be watching Pittsburgh sports right now. I'm always happy that baseball's back, even though the Pirates just never seem to care the fact that I'm watching, and that, they always just make me sad more often than not. But the Penguins, man, they're fun. And if you have a chance to get in and watch some Penguins games, I'm thinking about maybe going to one of these weekend games, whether that's against the Capitals or against the Panthers in these next couple of weeks, driving over from Cleveland. I have that idea. I'm not really sure exactly what I'm going to do with that yet, but I want to see this team, and this is a team that I might be able to see a playoff game of too, which is also something I'm really looking forward to. So big stuff going on in Pittsburgh, and like I started off the episode with, we will start to talk about the draft as well, because that is another big event that is going to be happening in Pittsburgh with a lot of implications on what the Steelers are going to be doing for the 2026-27 season. So keep an eye out for that episode, specifically related to the draft, coming in 2 weeks. And then we will have a special guest on the Boardman Black and Gold podcast next week. I will speak on David's behalf that he will not be with me next week, but will have a special guest. So keep an eye out for that episode. And as for myself, Zane Bloom, also on behalf of David DeSantis, we appreciate you listening to Boardman Black and Gold, which is always sponsored by Zecca Enterprises, crafting furniture solutions in northwestern Pennsylvania. You can call 919-406-4679 to turn your furniture problems into furniture solutions. Once again, you can always follow us on Instagram at Boardman and Gold. Make sure you check us out and make sure you tell us what your thoughts are on all the Pittsburgh sports teams. And I think that in the last week or so, the fact that we did have a Penguins and Pirates episode might be the dawn of a new age of this podcast, because as much as we love the Steelers, there are two other teams in Pittsburgh. And this is something that David and I have talked about for a while, that we do want to expand this podcast in some respects as far as what the actual content is. And no better time to do that than right now, especially with the offseason for the NFL kind of taking a back seat and not really having a whole lot of movement. We'll talk about the stuff that's relevant when that comes up, but I'll tell you what, if the Penguins do make the playoffs, then we'll be talking about that here on Boardman Black and Gold. If the Pirates continue to be terrible, or if they actually start to figure some things out, I'm sure we'll start to make mention of them as well. And we will start to have some guests on in the offseason as well. For the Steelers portion of the podcast, we'll have some guests talking about their takes specifically on the Steelers and what's going on with them. So keep an eye out for a fun offseason for the NFL on the Boardman Black and Gold podcast, which again, we thank you all for listening to. And myself, Zane, on behalf of David DeSantis and the Boardman Black and Gold podcast, thanks for listening. We will see you next week for our very special guest.